I believe in vulnerability. I slumped in my seat, peering down, wondering how time could move so slowly. I stared at my old, overweight professor as he scribbled senselessly on the chalkboard. My hand mindlessly copied down the numbers and symbols with hopes that he would slow down, or someone would put a stop to this monotonous regime. I watched as my professor stumbled towards the back of the uninterested, undisturbed classroom. He closed the prop door. I watched my peers scoot even further into their chairs as they saw their portal to freedom shut. My professor then placed the chalk on the ledge and created silence. What was happening? I thought to myself. Then I watched as my professor outstretched his arms, filled his lungs, and to my surprise, belted out in song. He had one of those magnificent voices you only hear a few times in your life. He was clearly a practiced musician with a sound that came deep within the diaphragm. The song boomed like a meteor, shattering the droning lives of the students in my class. Startled by the mere volume of his singing, my class was hurtled upright. Eyes pursued the source of the tremendous chords that were roaring from my mundane math professor. When my professor's singing had ended, he smiled, embracing the shocked faces of his students, and dismissed the class. A couple kids clapped, others laughed, but eventually we walked out and moved on with our busy days. Now, I smiled to myself, unable to forget the beaming confidence that arced across my professor's face. He was unaffected by the laughs of those who were inexperienced in putting themselves out there. But I got it. Recently, I put myself out there in the most defenseless kind of way. I fell in love. Then, I stood, heartbroken. My weakest moment was a consequence of my vulnerability. I gave my heart to him, knowing he could do with it what he wanted. It was a risk I would gladly take again, for it was in those moments of love that I experienced my greatest happiness. My math professor's love was singing. Like me, he accepted the risk of being vulnerable in order to experience his greatest happiness. He did not care for the reactions of his students, but freely chose to hand out invitations for his own criticism. Too often we become habitual creatures, living each day just as we did before, protecting ourselves with the familiar. It is those who take the risk of being vulnerable that live the most rewarding lives. And that is why I believe in vulnerability.